Okay, so there is one thing that most of us want when we step into the gym, and that is bigger arms. So what I'm going to be doing in this talk through and walk through video is taking you through my current arms workout and the tips, tricks, cues, execution techniques and exercise selection to let you know how I have been developing my arms through this off season to make sure that they are a strong point next time I get onto stage. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so first exercise, we have the preacher curl. The reason I put this first is because the preacher pad allows us to work the bicep initially. So on your freer weight exercises, some of the biggest drawbacks and limiting factors to your arm development is the use of the contributing muscles. So by having the arm on the preacher curl in a fixed position, it allows us to solely use and increase the contribution of the biceps to the movement and make sure that we're really getting blood into that before we move into our following movements, as this will allow us to use the biceps more in those movements as we already have blood into that muscle and it is primed, ready to work. To make sure this is happening, what we want to do is keep our elbow on the pad and then push our tricep into the pad. What this does, it creates a counter force. So by pushing the tricep into the pad, we create that counter force to allow the bicep to work the movement and be the biggest contributing factor to the movement. You can see I'm doing this single arm because what this allows me to do is you will find that sometimes, not everyone, but most people have a certain imbalance from their left to their right, whether that be strength, of course, but more so how we are made, our anatomy, our biomechanics. What I find is I have to turn my body and rotate a little bit more on my left side compared to my right. So if I was doing two arms, one of my arms would be more internally rotated than the other. Therefore, the bicep is not being worked as maximally, optimally when I'm performing a dual arm or bilateral movement. So to get the arm working and to make sure that both my biceps are firing equally, we start with a single arm movement. The setup here is a 5x15 pyramid style, gradually increasing the weight each time. And what we are really doing is we are working the bicep in the length and range. So as we are here, we're out here and we're really putting an emphasis in the stretch. So what we want to do is control the movement on the way down, make sure that our bicep is controlling the weight down, we're not just dropping our arms, and then create some slight pauses in the change of direction. So when we're fully lengthened and when we're fully contracted, some slight pauses to remove momentum and make sure that the tension on the biceps is kept constant. Constant tension will provide us with more stimulus and a better opportunity to grow. Okay, so we are moving into exercise 2. How I set up my arm workout is I do a 2 on, 2 off strategy, methodology, setup principle. So 2 biceps, 2 triceps, 2 biceps, 2 triceps, and that makes up the 8 exercises in my arms workout. So exercise number 2 is a single arm cable curl. Again, single arm because of the ease to get into the positions and also to make sure that my more dominant arm is not overpowering and taking more of the tension than the other arm. So to keep ourselves symmetrical and balanced and to fix any pre-existing imbalances that we may have. If you find that one of your arms seems to be bigger or one of your arms seems to get pumped a lot better than the other arm, that'll be because of an imbalance and you want to select single arm exercises to help counteract this and then fix this as a solution to your imbalance. But again, 5x15, pyramiding up in weight. And the reason for this exercise away facing is because what we are doing here, in contrast to the first exercise, which was focused on the lengthening of the bicep, this one's focused on the concentric, so the actual contraction of the bicep and the squeeze. So it gets harder as we contract and easier as we relax. Therefore, a massively important factor for this exercise is to make sure to fully contract the bicep. This may sound like the most obvious thing that someone can say, but it is with good reason. This is not a full contraction. What we need to do is we need to supinate. As you supinate your arm, it flexes more. And so it stands to reason, supinating your curls is going to get more out of the bicep in your regular curling exercises. But not only that, we want to supinate, but also really squeeze and a little bit of shoulder flexion to get a maximal contraction of the bicep. And this is what some people miss when they train with momentum and fling the bicep up. We're not getting a full range of motion and a fully shortened bicep, so we are missing out on gains, missing out on maximizing our bicep growth. Another key factor when performing this exercise is to lower the weight at the elbow, not at the arm. What I mean by this is, if I turn to the side, if you lower by the arm, you're coming back like this, and what this does is releases tension off the bicep and just drops the weight down. We want to release at the elbow and let our bicep and the elbow extension be the movement that we perform, as obviously elbow extension and elbow flexion are the movements of the arm, not shoulder extension. And then how I finish this is with a 3-stage drop set. I perform my top set, drop the weight, go again till failure, drop the weight and go again. Obviously the purpose of an intensity technique is to push you past your initial point of failure. If I fail on say 8 reps and then I drop the weight and get another 5 reps, that is 5 reps past the point point that I previously failed, and this will help get more out of your workouts. The reason I do it in this exercise and not in the first one is because I do not want to detract from the rest of the session and accumulate too much volume. I am a high volume trainer, but if I drop setted every exercise, the later exercises will be null and void and will not be productive to my physique development. Because we are taking that 2 off, like I mentioned before, performing a drop set will allow me adequate time to recover before we next attack the biceps in this workout. Okay, we move on to our third exercise of the workout and our first tricep exercise. You can see that I'm slightly leaned forward to make my arms more dominant in this movement than my chest, but also I am pinning my scapula back to minimize the contribution of the delts to the movement. What I do is obviously chest prominent here, move forward and let my arms come in front of the body. Coming in front of the body means that my arms will take the majority of the load, and then we're pinning our scapula back to limit the contribution of the delts to the movement and to the load, meaning that we can keep more tension on our triceps and therefore give it the best opportunity to grow. Tension equals stimulus equals growth. It is not the rep that grows the muscle, it is a stimulus you get from creating tension when performing the rep that grows muscle. Again, 5 by 15 is the setup, pyramiding up in weight. What you want to really focus on doing, similarly to the previous exercise, is to exaggerate the concentric contraction, exaggerate the squeeze on each of your reps. So you perform the rope push down and then you want to turn out your wrist to really exaggerate the elbow flexion and maximally flex the tricep. Like I said with the biceps, people tend to not fully complete the rep. This is ever more present in a rope push down. They just push down with their shoulders protracted so that they're not fully contracting the tricep. Their shoulder is taking over the movement, pin back scapula, more tension on the tricep, and then exaggerated squeeze to get a maximal contraction. So I talk about full range of motion. You want a full active range of motion. So when we come up to fully flex at the elbow, not to come up with our shoulder and flex. We want to keep scapula pin back, keep our shoulders depressed, and just work through the movement of the elbow and nothing else to get the most tension and to keep the tension constant on our triceps. Okay, our second tricep exercise and our fourth exercise of the workout is a machine dip. The reason I opt for a machine dip when it comes to tricep growth is because we can better isolate on a machine than we can on a free weight. On a free weight exercise, when you begin to fatigue, it is very easy for you to rely on your more dominant and your bigger muscle groups, so your chest and your delts, to push those final reps and get you to the closest proximity to failure, not your triceps. So your triceps aren't getting the full tension, the full load, and therefore not getting stimulated in the best way possible to grow your triceps. Obviously, as a full body development, it may be more beneficial, but if we are solely focusing on our triceps, the machine dip is the way to go. This is because we can manipulate the movement pathway and therefore better isolate the triceps. We're staying more upright as opposed to leaning in and using our chest. We are coming back and translating into shoulder extension as opposed to coming solely up and again bringing our chest into the movement. So we're upright and really pushing through the elbow as opposed to pushing through our chest and delts. Similarly to this, when I'm talking about the larger muscle groups and agonistic muscle groups that want to contribute to the movement, this is why control of the movement is imperative to smaller muscle groups like the arms. I mentioned controlling the changes of direction in the bicep exercises, but especially in a more compound exercise like a dip, we want to really control the movement, really exaggerate that eccentric and pause more in those changes in direction to keep constant tension on the muscle and therefore provide the best opportunity for that muscle group to grow. If we rush through the reps, we could not possibly keep the tension on the intended muscle, as it is smaller than the other two muscles that contribute to our pressing and pushing movements. And to safely allow for that extension of the shoulder without increasing our risk of injury, we need to be in control of our dipping movements. And of course, this applies to our training as a whole, but especially on our compound movements, where it is a lot easier for the larger muscle groups to contribute and take tension off the muscle group that we want to grow. Okay, now that you've seen me do a mid-session pump flex and my arms are full of blood, this brings me on to my next bicep exercise. Of course, we did the 2 on, 2 off, and now we're back for 2 more on our biceps. And this is a Fisher curl, across the body hammer curl with the dumbbells. And the reason being for this is to attack the muscle from different angles to get a more holistic and overall growth of each muscle group. What I mean by this is we could do 4 variations of a bicep curl: a dumbbell supinated curl, a cable supinated curl, a barbell curl, and a preacher curl in a supinated fashion. That is 4 exercises that may have different biases to where the tension is, but it is still the same movement done with different attachments and different equipment. So what I'm doing here is I'm internally rotating a little bit to get more tension in our brachioradialis and the bicep longus long head as opposed to just hammering the short head with our supinated movements. Of course, the bicep works in flexion and supination, but we need to get some of that work in our long head and our forearms as overall purpose of growth. So here I neglected to mention dips 4x12, bit more of a compound exercise, so the rep range is a little bit lower but high enough to not get too heavy to the fact where our larger muscle groups have to contribute. That leads on to this, where we want to make sure that we are using a higher volume and higher rep range when it comes to our arm training. Higher volume because we can recover better in our smaller muscle groups like our arms, as opposed to our larger muscle groups like our legs and our back. The time of recovery is a little less, so we can attack it with a bit more volume and a bit more frequency if needs be, but also a higher rep range because this will allow us to keep the load lighter and maintain better contraction of our biceps or our triceps in that portion of the arms workout. Like I said, if we go too heavy, it is only going to invite our larger muscle groups to take over the movement. Therefore, going heavier does not actually mean we're getting more load and more tension on our arms. Going heavier may mean we get less because we are relying on our larger muscle groups to move the weight as opposed to the intended muscle group being the arms. So 4x12 to 15 here. I attempt for 15, but I can take a progression if I get 12. And like I just mentioned, we're keeping it so that we can keep the tension on our bicep. I'm slightly leant to the side to keep the bicep in constant tension, as over here our bicep is not under tension as gravity is taking the weight down through our shoulders and our traps, as opposed to like this where we can get a isometric contraction of the bicep before we've even started the set, therefore maximizing the potential of keeping the tension on the muscle. Okay, so we're back on the cables for another variation of the hammer curl. This is one that my coach Brad taught me to really exaggerate the full range of motion when performing a hammer curl. So the reason that we tend to use cables and machines for our arm training is because of that constant tension on the muscle that I have spoken about many times in this video. Using a dumbbell, although previously I just did, like I mentioned in that exercise, gravity can just take tension off of the bicep if you do not keep in a strict form and position. But even then, because it is a free weight, it can lose tension, whereas in a cable the tension is constant and obviously increase a little bit as we contract, and obviously with the machine the tension is constant as it works in the arc of the machine. But this is just an added bit of volume that we implement into my arm training to maximally fatigue the arms. Just 3 sets here, starting at our heaviest and getting lighter as we go to finish off the arms, as opposed to the usual pyramid in up. We are just working till we can and just dropping down 3 sets. So how this is performed is we perform a regular hammer curl, and then like I said, the bicep not only works in elbow flexion but also supination. So we want to come up, perform about 3/4 of a hammer curl, and then the final quarter exaggerate our supination, not using our upper back and our scapula to retract the weight. We are supinating the arm and twisting out in an exaggerated manner to get a full concentric contraction and squeeze of the bicep on each rep, making sure, like I said, not to come up with our traps or pull back with our scapula. We are really keeping tension on the arms using the supination as an exercise variation to exaggerate the concentric contraction. Again, like in the second exercise on the first round of bicep exercises, a drop set finishes the bicep portion of the workout. You'll also see when I do finally fatigue in the variation, I perform 10 regular hammer curls. This is an intensity technique where you make the exercise easier to push past the point of failure. This is called a mechanical advantage. You can do this on many exercises. For example, on a rope push down, if you grab higher up the rope, it will make it easier to perform the reps. This is because it is easier for you to mechanically move the weight, so mechanical advantage, hence the name. Similar to this, we can't get any more reps using the exaggerated variation, so we just come down and push out a few more reps to push past the initial point of failure and really get as much stimulus into the biceps to grow them as much as possible and give them the best opportunity to grow. Moving on to our final 2 exercises of the workout, we have got an overhead cable extension. I like to do the single arm for the same way that I like to do my bicep exercises single arm. Of course, the strength differences to fix imbalances, but for me personally, it is the biomechanical changes and asymmetry from left to right. Like I said, my left side is a little more internally rotated than my right. So if I was like this, I'd be a little bit like this. So doing it single arm, I can really manipulate where my body position is to make sure that I'm doing it the same way on my left arm as I am when I'm on my right arm. Again, a 5x15. This is because this is quite a compromising position. So higher rep range, like I said, reduces the risk of injury as well as the contribution contribution of the larger agonistic muscle groups. But the reason for an overhead exercise, so the tricep split into 3 heads, and one of the properties of the tricep is in shoulder flexion, so arms above the head. So if we only performed downwards moving exercises, so extension in our rope and the extension through our dipping movements, it's only downwards movements, incorporating that shoulder flexion to perform our overhead extension, we're getting work not only in our long head in this position, the long head works more in overhead movements, but we also get more of a contribution of that medial head that hides itself behind the tricep long head. The long head is a larger sub muscle group of the tricep than the medial head, which is a very small niche muscle which can easily be overpowered and therefore neglected in our tricep training if we only perform exercises in one manner. Like I said with the bicep curls, you can do a million variations of the same curl, you can do a million variations of the same extension. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure this is just how I'm comfortable. Find out how you're comfortable. I'm not doing this for it to stop myself moving because we're pushing up as opposed to out. You get in a position where your shoulder is comfortable and therefore won't try to move out to get more comfortable, and then just perform extension over the head. You can see that I've got the cable setting up a little bit higher, so I'm not pulled back as I do it. I can stay comfortably in my fixed position and I'm not rocking when I perform my extension. I can stay comfortable and go. If you struggle with this, you can do it across the body like this or downwards as well, and then you can just work on your shoulder mobility and work your ways coming down and down and down and down as you go until you can comfortably perform an overhead extension. And then last but not least, I added a full bicep exercise to my arms workout, so I thought it right to add a full tricep exercise in the same fashion where I start at the heaviest and then really finish off and fatigue the tricep through one set, a little bit lighter for the second set, and then a drop set to finish off, similarly to the bicep curls. When you perform a press down movement, it is ever more important to keep fixed. Obviously I mentioned how important it is to keep fixed in our rope push downs to keep tension on the tricep, but on this movement it allows you to use more load and therefore it allows you more potential to ego lift and use your agonistic muscles to contribute to the movement as opposed to our intended tricep muscles. So again, scapula retracted to minimize the use of the shoulders, and then depressing the shoulders to minimize their contribution even further. Length forward a little bit just so that we're not rocking as we move, we're keeping ourselves fixed in a slightly length forward position. And then just again, as the moral of the story with tricep exercises, we are pushing down through the elbow, not through our shoulders, not through our chest, not through our wrists, pushing through the elbow. Right, so okay, that is going to end the video as this concludes the arms workout and how I am training to grow my arms, my sets, reps, setup techniques, execution techniques, mental cues to use the arms better, and how I am making sure that my arms are getting the best opportunity to grow that they possibly can. So I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click that notification bell so you do not miss when we upload. These workout walkthroughs are coming thick and fast, as well as my weekly off-season vlog where it's a bit more personable and I take you through my personal life as I try to get as big as possible. So if you did enjoy, like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share this video to a friend to help grow their arms. Let's have a summer where we all have massive arms. That is that. Thanks again for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.